If I could ask you one final question. This week, Peter Dutton, the Immigration Minister, has said that the coalition government has had to deal with a caseload of 30,000 people that came under Labor. I think that is a fact that's indisputable. It's been found, according to the Immigration Minister, that 10,000 of those are economic refugees. So they've got temporary protection visas at the moment. Labor, that's one aspect of the policy that Labor doesn't support. So what would Labor do with those? I'd assume that you'd offer those 10,000 economic refugees permanent resettlement in Australia. Is that right?
What we would do is, of course, have these people assessed, and we would...
But why do you need to reassess them if the department's already assessed them as economic refugees?
Well, if I haven't been briefed by the department, can I say, Laura? But if I was the Minister, I'd be briefed by the department straight away. We want to end temporary protection visas. We don't want people left in limbo. Our policy was, of course, to transition these people into permanent migration. That was our policy at the last election, remains our policy now. We don't agree with temporary protection visas. We think that these people are living in the country. They should be integrated in our society. They're making a contribution. We should end the migration limbo that they find themselves in.
So the 10,000, and I know you haven't been briefed, you would give them permanent status in Australia?
I'd be asking the department for a briefing in relation to it. As a policy, we are opposed to temporary protection visas, and I'd be looking to transition people who have been assessed by the department as genuine refugees into permanent arrangements.
But if they are assessed as economic refugees, what do you do with them then? Permanent arrangements still?
I'd be asking the department for a briefing in relation to all those issues and looking at each case on a case-by-case basis. The point I'm making
But would economic refugees be given permanent status in Australia?
No. Well, I would look at this particular issue. If they've been assessed as refugees by the department, we would have them come to Australia.
But if they're assessed as economic refugees, Mr Newman...
They need to be assessed as refugees in relation to this issue. If they're coming here and they're fleeing, for example, if they're saying that they're coming for reasons other than properly being assessed as refugees, fleeing from persecution, fleeing from war situations, we would find them in a position where we would assess them, and I would ask for a briefing from the department, and I would find out where the situation is. We would end temporary protection visas. If these people were genuine refugees, they'd stay in this country.
OK, so is what you're saying, though, if the department, after you received a briefing, they were found to be economic refugees, you would, even though Labor doesn't support the temporary protection visa system, you would have no choice but to extend that for economic refugees?
I would ask the department for an assessment in relation to each and every case and where it's up to. If they were found to be proper refugees in accordance with the UN Convention, they've properly been assessed as refugees, we keep them in Australia, transition as we have.
I think we're clear on that, but what if they are found to be economic refugees?
If they're simply in a position where they are not found to be refugees in accordance with the Convention, then they have to go through our immigration processes.
So they'd have to stay on temporary protection visas?
Well, we would get into the temporary protection visas and we'd be looking at each and every case as to whether they stay in this country or otherwise.
But if it's not temporary protection visas, what is it?
Well, they'd be in a position, Laura, where we would look at each and every case. We'd see if they've been found to be refugees, as I said. If they're not found to be refugees, they can't stay in this country. If they're found to be refugees, they can. And we would look at transitioning people in a position where they are refugees into permanent arrangements. We would look at each and every case. I would get a briefing from the department.
OK, so if they're found to be economic refugees, you'd hope there would be a third country option by then and you'd send them to a third country, but if not, they'd stay on TPVs.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we'd get a briefing from the department. If they're found to be refugees, they'd stay in this country and that's where they'd stay.
Not quite sure where Labor would put those 10,000 economic refugees, but what is clear is that they're opposed to temporary protection visas.